East. We'll see temperatures again into the mid-20s, but elsewhere temperatures a little lower than of late and turning fresher as this band of rain moves in through the evening. So most places seeing some rain during the overnight period, that band of rain swinging its way northwards. That is that cold front, and so temperatures won't be as high overnight. It will still be quite warm and humid this evening, so still quite uncomfortable for sleeping, but by morning temperatures will be that much lower and certainly a fresher feel on Saturday. Still sunny spells for many eastern areas on Saturday. Sunshine for most of the day across northeast Scotland, eastern parts of England, but further west, after a largely sunny start, the showers will get going. The showers will tend to zip through because it's also going to be quite blustery, unseasonably gusty winds around western coast in particular. That'll make it feel even cooler with temperatures in the mid-teens at best in some places. Still quite warm across eastern parts where we'll see the longer spells of sunshine. A few more of those showers drifting north across Scotland during Saturday evening. A bit more wet weather working into Northern Ireland at the same time. A big swirl of low pressure which will continue to throw showers across the country on Sunday, mostly in the west where it'll be windy, generally dry and sunny in the east.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the Northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over the next hour. The government suffers a triple blow as they lose 2 by-elections and party chair Oliver Dowden in one night. I'll be joined by our reporters who are at both constituencies, plus Delta Poll co-founder Joe Twynham, to see what it means for the government. The United Nations has ruled the imprisonment of businessman Ryan Cornelius is unlawful. He has been detained in Dubai for almost 15 years. We'll be speaking to Lord Clement Jones. And an exclusive interview as our Home and Security editor Mark White speaks to Policing Minister Kit Malthouse about police recruitment and how he believes they will meet the target of 20,000 new police officers across England and Wales. And throughout the programme, I'm going to be joined by journalist and political commentator Emma Wolfe. So give us your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says he'll keep going despite suffering double by-election defeats and a resignation from his party chairman. A warning: the following footage contains flashing images. The Liberal Democrats overturned a 24,000 Tory majority in the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton, while in West Yorkshire, Labour reclaimed the Red Wall seat of Wakefield. Oliver Dowden reacted to the results by handing in his resignation, saying somebody needed to take responsibility. Boris Johnson's vowed to listen to voters following the double defeat.
Absolutely true that we've had some tough by-election results, and they've been, I think, a reflection of a lot of things, but we've got to recognise that voters are going through a tough time at the moment, and I think that as a government I've got to listen to what people are saying, and in particular to the difficulties people are facing over the cost of living, which is, I think, for most people the number one issue.
After his party's by-election victory, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has called Wakefield the birthplace of the next Labour government.
The Tory party is absolutely imploding. They know they're out of ideas and they're out of touch. And if they had any decency, they'd get out of the way for the next Labour government, because what happened here in Wakefield was people exercising their judgment on this Conservative government and voting no confidence.
That while Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey visited Tiverton to celebrate his party's by-election victory, he said it's time to show Boris Johnson the door.
Today, the Liberal Democrats have shown that the rule of Boris Johnson and this uncaring Conservative government can be ended. But today is just a start. So join us and let's get rid of them.
Child killer James Watson has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 15 years for the murder of 6-year-old Ricky Neve in 1994. The 41-year-old was 13 when he lured the schoolboy to woods near his home in Peterborough and strangled him. Watson's been handed a term relevant to his age, a child himself, at the time of the offence. He was identified by DNA on Ricky's clothes following a re-examination of the case 2 decades later. Former Assistant Chief Constable Paul Fulwood says Watson hasn't shown any remorse.
I've seen somebody who's a fantasist, a compulsive liar, a sexual predator, and there were missed opportunities. And, you know, there's lessons that have been learned, and those are lessons that will be learned in terms of moving forward.
The number of people in hospital with COVID-19 is on the rise in most parts of the UK, suggesting the virus is becoming steadily more prevalent again. Overall infections continue to go up in all 4 nations, figures show, with the increase likely to be driven by the latest Omicron variants BA4 and BA5. Members of the RMT union who work on the London Underground have voted to continue industrial action as the dispute over jobs, pay and conditions continues. 91% voted to strike in the coming weeks and months, although no dates have yet been decided. Train services across the UK have been disrupted this week due to RMT walkouts, with a 3rd day of strikes planned tomorrow. More unions say they'll ballot staff next week, making further disruption likely over the summer. And the President of Ukraine has called on Glastonbury festival goers to put pressure on politicians to help restore peace in his country. Speaking via video link, Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he wants the war to stop before it ruins lives in other nations around the world. He also urged the crowd to help prove that freedom always wins.
Glastonbury is the greatest concentration of freedom these days, and I ask you to share this feeling with everyone whose freedom is under attack. Spread the truth about Russia's war. Help Ukrainians who are forced to flee their homes because of the war. Find our United 24 charity platform and put pressure on all the politicians you know to help restore peace in Ukraine.
Powerful words there from Volodymyr Zelenskyy. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Arlene with the briefing.
Welcome back to the briefing. So it's been a triple blow for the Prime Minister just a matter of weeks after he survived a confidence vote in his leadership. The Conservatives lost not 1 but 2 by-elections overnight, and this morning the Tory party chair, Oliver Dowden, is resigned from his role. The traditional red wall seat of Wakefield, which the Conservatives won at the 2019 election, is now back in the hands of the Labour Party. Simon Lightwood defeated Tory candidate Nadeem Ahmed by 4,925 votes in the poll to overturn a majority of 3,358. Turnout was just over 39%. Minutes after the declaration in Wakefield, the Liberal Democrats took Tiverton and Honiton in Devon from the Conservatives, overturning a majority of more than 24,000. Richard Ford, a former Army Major, said it sent out a loud and clear message. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's majority in the House of Commons has now fallen to 68. After both defeats, Conservative Party Chairman Oliver Dowden handed in his resignation letter. Dowden has been a long-standing supporter of the Prime Minister, and in his letter he wrote, quote, our supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events, and I share their feelings. We cannot carry on with business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility, and I have concluded that in these circumstances it would not be right for me to remain in office. Well, joining me now from Westminster is our political reporter, Arlene Foster, to discuss, goodness, what a night from last night. Catherine, is it a case, as the Prime Minister would have us believe, of mid-term blues?
Well, obviously, he's very keen for everybody to think that. He's very keen for everyone to think that this is about cost of living and that that is something that he can sort out. He's very keen to stress that he has a mandate from his 80-seat majority only 2.5 years ago. But my goodness, how the world has changed since Boris Johnson was elected. I think, obviously, despite what they say, or what Boris Johnson says, because the Conservatives on the whole have been very, very quiet, these are disastrous results for the Conservative Party, and there is now going to be a huge amount of soul-searching going on. They're very, very quiet, a little bit, I think, like children. Parents need to worry when children are quiet. I think Boris Johnson should be worrying because there hasn't been much in the way of a show of support. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, did come out with a tweet at about 10:30 saying he regretted that Oliver Dowden had resigned as chair of the Conservative Party and that we must all take responsibility and deliver for the people with cost of living. There haven't been many others. Dominic Raab appeared briefly, didn't have a terribly successful outing this morning on broadcast. Nadine Dorries, one of Boris Johnson's stalwart cheerleaders, has been supportively tweeting, but I would say it took her till 1:30 this afternoon. And she was just saying, we've got to get on. And she said, history tells us how useless by-election results are as an indication of anything at all. Of course, John Major lost several by-elections between 1992 and 1997. And we all know what happened in that election. It led to a Labour landslide. So I think 291 Conservative MPs are sitting in seats that are less safe than Tiverton and Honiton in Devon, which have just had a 24,000 majority overturned. That is going to worry a lot of MPs. And it's interesting, isn't it, how the vote of no confidence that was held not even 3 weeks ago, where 148 of Boris Johnson's own MPs voted to get rid of him. I suspect there'll be a lot more MPs now thinking, is he going to lead us to victory in the next election, or do we need to get rid of him now? Is he going to take us to defeat if he stays?
Well, Catherine, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned about, what would happen in a general election, because John Rentoul, who of course is a Labour commentator, I would put him down as, has said that what happened in Wakefield actually is not enough to give Keir Starmer the keys of number 10, because if you look back at when Corby had a by-election in 2012, it was a similar sort of swing, and they lost a seat in the general election and didn't actually win the general election. So is it a case that we're reading too much into these by-election results, do you think?
Well, we always get very excited about by-election results, and of course they're not representative in any way really about what would happen in a general election, because people vote differently, people vote tactically, as they sometimes do in general elections. Clearly they've done so here, lending their votes to the Lib Dems or Labour, depending to get to unseat the Conservatives. But I think OK, a 12.7% swing to Labour in Wakefield. Keir Starmer is cock-a-hoop. It may have taken the pressure off him. Of course, there's always the Durham police investigation where he could come unstuck. But the pressure is off him in terms of his leadership. But as John says, the fact that people have turned against the Conservatives doesn't necessarily mean that that is a ringing endorsement for Labour. A lot of people have voted against something that they don't want, rather than a positive vote for something that they do want, i.e. Keir Starmer, and a lot of people are unsure of him. But certainly I think if there was a general election tomorrow, Boris Johnson's 80-seat majority would be gone, and it's always hard to make predictions from these things, but it seems to be there is a pattern. Certainly Tiverton and Honiton, which possibly the more significant victory. This is now the third big victory for the Lib Dems in a by-election in the last year. Doesn't necessarily mean they would wipe the floor across the southwest in an election, of course, but it does put a lot of pressure now on the government. Are they going in the right direction? Is Boris Johnson the man to lead them? They elected him because he was a winner. He won as Labour mayor, as Conservative in a Labour city, pardon me. Twice. He brought them an 80-seat majority. He got Brexit done, well, apart from the protocol, as you know.
Well, absolutely, Catherine,
Sorry,
and thank you
said
for
something to me then.
No. Well, thank you, Catherine, for joining us from Westminster. I'm going to turn now to Emma, who's with me in the studio, for all of this programme. And I mean, there is a point there. Wakefield, I don't think, was a huge surprise because there wasn't a big majority there to start with. I think Honiton, it's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, Tiverton and Honiton really is. That was a nearly 25,000 seat majority. And, you know, these results are absolutely, they are disastrous. But I also think we need to keep it in perspective. This was not a general election. It was two by-elections, which, you know, happened on the same night, both for similar unfortunate reasons. And the turnout was pretty low. So I think we have to keep that in perspective as well. Nicola Sturgeon has been out on the airwaves just now saying that this was a monumental, massive and humiliating vote of no confidence.
Well, she would, wouldn't she?
Well, she would, wouldn't she? And yes, it is. And Boris Johnson, let's remember, is out of the country for 8 days.
Yeah.
It kind of makes him vulnerable, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard Geoffrey Clifton Brown saying the Prime Minister needs to come home immediately and deal with this situation.
Yeah.
Kind of imagining him throwing his swimming trunks into a bag and jumping on a plane. I think Catherine's right. It's this sort of quietness, which is, or it's the quiet that's alarming. People haven't been rushing out. There's a sort of sense, not just, OK, they lost the two by-elections, but how are the MPs going to respond? What happens next? I think that is what will decide Boris Johnson's future over the next week.
Yeah, because, of course, divided parties, as you know, don't win elections. And actually, it's the fact that we are now having grandees coming out and saying, right, that's it, he has to go, like Lord Howard obviously came out today and said he had to go.
I think Michael Howard's assessment at lunchtime was pretty damning. I think Oliver Dowden's letter, you've got the letter there.
Sure.
I think that letter is damaging as well. It's a very honest letter. It feels as though there's a man who has principles. And he's not, he's not the usual suspect. He's an ally. He's a Boris Johnson ally. So I think his position, I know we've been saying this since Partygate. We've been saying it for 6, 7, 8 months. His position now is once again looking really shaky. And it's the MPs who suddenly feel, hang on a minute, I don't know, what was it, 290 MPs who are less secure than Tiverton and Honiton was, last night.
Yeah. And, I mean, you're right about Oliver Dowden because, of course, he's very much a party loyalist. He's been there for various leaders. And that line in his letter, that he'll be loyal to the Conservative Party, full stop.
He will remain loyal to the Conservative Party, yeah, absolutely.
So there's no mention of the current incumbent in Downing Street when he has made that. But, of course, there are some who have come out to support the Prime Minister, Nadine Dorries, of course, Conor Burns, people who feel very strongly that if you look back at the Thatcher era, there were by-election losses as well.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to this, of course, with another guest later on. But after the break, we'll be speaking to Lib Dem peer Lord Clement Jones to find out why he's working to free a British businessman who has been held for over 15 years in a Dubai prison. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Afternoon, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fresher feel arriving for all of us this weekend, with western areas quite blustery with plenty of showers, but in the east, many places dry and bright with sunny spells. This cold front is swinging across the country tonight, introducing the cooler air, but the low is sticking around like an unwanted guest through the weekend. Tightly packed isobars suggesting some pretty gusty conditions in the west. But it's across the northeast into southeast Scotland where we've got the risk of some disruption this evening. Some thunderstorms that have been breaking out, bringing the potential for some very heavy downpours and hailstorms as well. But that cold front swings through and moves away those thundery showers and eventually introducing cooler air. It'll still be pretty warm and humid and difficult for sleeping this evening, but by dawn most of us will feel that fresher air and a cooler feel on Saturday. Still quite a bit of sunshine around, certainly for eastern parts of Scotland and eastern England. But further west, yes, there'll be some sunny spells, but also we are expecting showers over the Midlands, Wales, western parts of England and some across southwest Scotland. Could be quite wet in the west of Northern Ireland as well, but as I say, some sunny spells elsewhere. Still reasonably pleasant in the east, but it won't be as humid. Temperatures in the low 20s, whereas for many western areas we're only looking at temperatures in the mid to high teens. Feeling cooler with the winds as well. You can see that swirl there. That's that low pressure system. Gusty winds continuing in the west overnight and into Sunday. Could bring some disruption to the ferry services as that band of rain then moves its way a little bit further eastwards during Sunday. So more showers on Sunday for Wales, western parts of Scotland. A wetter day here. More heavy downpours across Northern Ireland. But again, notice in the east, certainly on Sunday, East Anglia in the southeast, not many showers at all. Many places will be dry. We could still squeak up to 20 Celsius here, but again, for many places, we're only in the high teens and feeling cooler with that gusty wind.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the Northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us. 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. So the United Nations has called for the immediate release of the British businessman Ryan Cornelius, who has been imprisoned in Dubai since 2008. He was initially sentenced to 10 years for fraud. However, after serving his time, he was then given another 20-year stretch. And both the family and members of both Houses of Parliament have been calling for the government to do more to intervene. Well, I'm very pleased to say I've now been joined by the Lib Dem peer, Lord Clement Jones, who has personally asked the Foreign Secretary to help. And I've seen a copy of the letter, Lord Clement Jones, which he sent to the Secretary of State. But before we talk about that, could you perhaps tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about the background of this case?
Well, the background is that indirectly, Ryan Cornelius, a businessman, had a loan from the Dubai Islamic Bank, and that was covered by a personal guarantee and quite a large number of assets. A development in Dubai in particular worth something of the order of $1 billion, and the loan was for about $500 million. What happened is that fraudulently, effectively, the chairman of the Dubai Islamic Bank arranged for Ryan to be arrested, charged in Arabic, in a language he doesn't understand. A court gave judgment that he should be imprisoned for 10 years. And then a further 20 years was added at the end of the original 10-year sentence. And in fact, the Dubai Islamic Bank has had complete control of this asset worth £1 billion. So there is no way that there has been any detriment to the bank at all. So it's completely trumped up. He's been extremely poorly treated. He hasn't. It took 18 months for him, for instance, to have treatment for TB in jail. They have to pay for everything, even everything: phone charges, soap, razors. This is a terrible regime that he's been subjected to, and basically he's being kept in jail at the behest of the ruler of the Dubai the director of the Dubai Rulers Court, Mohammed Al-Shaibani. And I raised this exactly a year ago in the House of Lords, subject, of course, to privilege, because the whole case is a totally corrupt, trumped-up set of circumstances, and he is the victim. And I've been pressing the Commonwealth and Development Office and successive ministers since 2014 to do something about this. And I'm afraid to say that they haven't. We, the family.
My goodness, I think we've lost Lord Clement Jones, which is really unfortunate. I hope we can get him back again, because this is a very important case, and I really felt strongly that we needed to discuss this today. Emma, you've been looking at this case as well. This is really shocking stuff, isn't it?
I'm really glad you guys have brought this up. I'd not heard of it. I'd not read about it. I didn't know anything about this. This is a man in his late 60s. Yep. His health is deteriorating. We've heard about TB, but COVID, other things. And it's really frightening, Arlene, to think that one could be stranded abroad for whatever reason. Yeah. And it sounds like he's done absolutely nothing wrong. I don't know the ins and outs of it. But one could be stranded abroad somewhere like Dubai and absolutely receive no help from the Foreign Office, from the FCDO or the UK government. And the family, they say they've been campaigning for 15 years. His wife says that, all our pleas to the FCDO have been ignored.
Well, that's what shocks me the most, because, obviously different countries have different rules, and we know that the Middle East have a very different legal system to what we have. But do you expect the UK Consul General or the UK Ambassador to be able to sort things out and to get you out of prison if you've been unlawfully held. But yet, this man has been kept in prison for 15 years.
And it sounds as though that no one really has been attending to the family's pleas, that no one really has given it much attention.
I think Lord Clement Jones is back with us again. I hope he is. Good, great. I just wanted to move on, and thank you for explaining the background to the case so clearly for us. But the most recent correspondence you've had with Liz Truss has again taken it a step further, because the United Nations have now come into the case and have said that Ryan's detention is illegal, arbitrary and dangerous. Have you had any response to that letter?
Well, we sent her the letter, as you say, Arlene. We got a letter back on the 21st of June, but it's incredibly wishy-washy. And in fact, it's another brush-off by the FCDO. I mean, it's full of language like monitoring, considering, reviewing, but no action at all. I mean, what needs to happen is very strong representations need to be made to the UAE, and what's more, Magnitsky sanctions need to be imposed on Mohammed al-Shaibani, and there appears to be no signs of that. It's all being considered, but there's no action as far as we can see. And let me tell you, I've been in correspondence with successive ministers since 2014, and the tone of the current letter is no different from the previous letters.
I almost think that it has been drafted by an official, if I may be so bold. But let me say this. I mean, this is a very important case, because I've just been reading about why the Magnitsky legislation came into force, and the fact that it came as a result of Sergei Magnitsky being murdered in Russia, and that was the whole impetus behind that legislation coming into place. I mean, that legislation is now on the statute book in the UK. You're, of course, calling for Ryan to be released immediately and without any charges. But you also want the government to take action, don't you, in relation to the assets of this individual who's behind all of this?
100%. And, you know, we have wonderful support from Bill Browder, who really was the architect of Magnitsky sanctions. And, you know, right from the beginning, he felt that this fell full square within the terms of Magnitsky, and therefore we arranged to make an appeal to the Foreign Office to impose these sanctions. And it's since February, we've heard nothing, basically. We've heard very little on the UN determination, but this seems to be standard FCDO procedure. So, you know, really what we're trying to do is put more and more pressure on the FCDO to actually do something. And of course, occasionally they do. I mean, with Matthew Hedges, who was accused of spying in the UAE, they did a little bit more. And of course, with Nazanin Zahawi-Ratcliffe, they managed to do a bit more, although it took them an awful long time to pull their finger out. So there are things they could do if only they had the political will to do so. Other countries do this, America, France, Germany, and it seems Australia. But it seems that our Foreign Office are peculiarly weak in this department.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, and we're going to revisit this again. I want to give you that assurance, because I think this is really important. This is an ill man. Even if he wasn't ill, it would still be a real injustice. But the fact that he is so ill in a prison in the way that he is, really, we need to keep the pressure on. So thank you, Lord Clement Jones, for joining me this afternoon. And we asked the Foreign Office for a comment on the matter, and they said to us, we have provided support to a British man detained in the UAE and will continue to do so. We have been in close contact with the UAE authorities to ensure that the welfare of all British people in UAE prisons is met. A bit wishy-washy, as I think you will agree. Well, we're going to move on now to the news. After the break, we're speaking to co-founder of Delta Poll, Joe Twynham, on the by-election results and, of course, the RMT strikes. Our Home Affairs editor, Mark White, also has an exclusive interview with Policing Minister Kit Malthouse on the police force's push for new recruits. And we'll be heading to Rwanda with our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. But first, here's the news with Rihanna.
Thank you, Arlene. It's 3:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom, and we start with some breaking news. Millions of women in the US will lose the legal right to abortion. That's after the Supreme Court voted to overturn the 50-year-old landmark Roe v. Wade ruling that legalised it nationwide. The power to decide on abortion for tens of millions of women will now be handed to the 50 states to determine individually. The Conservative majority court upheld a Republican-backed Mississippi law that bans abortion after 15 weeks. And we'll bring you more on that as we get it. The Prime Minister says he'll keep going despite suffering double by-election defeats and a resignation from his party chairman. A warning: the following footage contains flashing images. The Liberal Democrats overturned a 24,000 Tory majority in the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton, while in West Yorkshire, Labour reclaimed the red wall seat of Wakefield. The Tory party chair, Oliver Dowden, reacted to the results by resigning, saying somebody needed to take responsibility. Boris Johnson's vowed to listen to voters following the double defeat.
Absolutely true that we've had some tough by-election results, and they've been, I think, a reflection of a lot of things, but we've got to recognise that voters are going through a tough time at the moment, and I think that as a government I've got to listen to what people are saying, and in particular to the difficulties people are facing over the cost of living, which is, I think, for most people the number one issue.
Child killer James Watson has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 15 years for the murder of 6-year-old Ricky Neve in 1994. The 41-year-old was 13 when he lured the schoolboy to woods near his home in Peterborough and strangled him. Watson's been handed a term relevant to his age, a child himself, at the time of the offence. And the President of Ukraine has called on Glastonbury festival goers to put pressure on politicians to help restore peace in his country. Speaking via video link, Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he wants the war to stop before it ruins lives in other nations around the world. He also urged the crowd to help prove that freedom always wins.
Glastonbury is the greatest concentration of freedom these days, and I ask you to share this feeling with everyone whose freedom is under attack. Spread the truth about Russia's war. Help Ukrainians who are forced to flee their homes because of the war. Find our United 24 charity platform and put pressure on all the politicians you know to help restore peace in Ukraine.
Powerful words. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. A few moments ago, the pound was at 123.09 against the dollar and 116.56 against the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,482.82 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the Northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat
Naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. It's just 37 minutes past 3. It has been a complicated night for the government after they lost not one, but 2 by-elections. Labour reclaimed Wakefield after they lost it in 2019, winning with a majority of 4,925. Tiverton and Honiton went to the Lib Dems, making it one of the worst by-election losses in history, with more than a 24,000 majority for the Tories overturned. And after the Prime Minister's double defeat, he was dealt another blow when Conservative Party chairman and long-time supporter Oliver Dowden handed in his resignation letter. So is the PM under renewed pressure? Joining me to digest last night's result is Joe Twynham, co-founder and director of Delta Poll. Welcome, Joe. Well, it's a little bit of an understatement to say it's been a bad night for the PM. I was just talking to Emma about it earlier. I think Wakefield doesn't really go to show much, but the other one in the southwest of England has been quite a huge election overturn, hasn't it?
Yes, that's right. I think in footballing terms, had it been a 1-1 draw, then I think the Conservative fans would have gone home happy, satisfied with the overall result. But a 2-0 loss, and particularly the manner of that second victory in Tiverton and Honiton, will cause, I imagine, real concern for many Conservatives, both within the party, within Westminster and more widely among their supporters in the country, because Tiverton and Honiton was an example of a seat that has stayed resolutely Conservative for many, many years. In 1997, when Tony Blair won a landslide across so many parts of the country, it remained Conservative. At the last election, more than 60% of people voted Conservative. And yet, it's now gone Lib Dem, and there are 291 Conservative MPs who have a seat that is less safe than Tiverton and Honiton. And although by-elections are different in many ways, and you can't read too much into it, if I were them, I would be looking forward and wondering what would happen next, but I'd also be looking over my shoulder.
Yeah, but the thing that struck me, Joe, when I was listening to both the leader of the Liberal Democrats and the leader of the Labour Party, they weren't talking about their great policies and why they had won with these great policies. It was actually just attacking the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but that's political strategy. I mean, that's been.
But is that enough to win a general election, though? The point I'm making is
hundreds of years. That's what you do. That's what you do at a by-election.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is if it was a general election, they would have to actually lay out their stall and their policies. And are people just voting against the Conservative Party at the moment? They don't seem to be voting for either Labour or the Liberal Democrats.
Well, as I say, by-elections are very different in many ways, and they're fought on different issues, and they're fought on different tactics and different strategies. And so we can't read too much into these two results. But what it does indicate is that at the current time, and this, of course, may well change, but at the current time, the Conservatives are not doing well, and they hand, if you like, an electoral gift to both their opponents, whether it's Labour in Wakefield or the Lib Dems in the southwest of England, in that their performance when it comes to, firstly, issues such as the cost of living, which is by far the most important issue facing this country at the moment in the polls, or also when it comes to questions of leadership and the attributes that people attach to Boris Johnson around dishonesty, around not playing fairly and not sticking to the rules. The combination of those two things has been very damaging to the Conservatives. Now, in a general election, of course, when you're campaigning to be the government, you do set out your policies and your entire entire method of governing. But of course, we're not there yet. We're not at a general election, and so instead, at a by-election where you don't need to do that, the parties concentrate on attacking their opponents, and that's why, of course, historically, you do tend to see governments lose by-elections. Now, that's not always the case. Tony Blair won a whole series of by-elections when he was Prime Minister. But generally speaking, you suffer bad performances during by-elections when you're the sitting government. But rarely are those performances as bad as we saw in Tiverton and Honiton last night.
And Joe, just before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about the polling around the RMT strike and possibly more strikes. We've already heard about Heathrow having difficulties there. And 37% of Britons are supporting the strikes at this moment in time, 45% oppose. That's from a YouGov poll published today. Has that moved, or where do you see that going over the next couple of weeks?
Well, it's interesting you quote those figures because it's one of those, the issue is one of those interesting areas where the nuances of the wording in the question actually determines to a great extent the response that people give. When you talk about whether the strikes are justified or not, one poll showed that a majority of people felt they were justified, but at the same time, a majority of people thought they shouldn't go ahead. That, to me, demonstrates there is support for the principle and for the grievances that people are raising when they go on strike, if not for the actual action itself. Now, I think that if the disruption increases, becomes more frequent over the next few weeks, then we may see a change to those figures. But it's very difficult to say because of the context in which this takes place. And we have, for instance, more recently had a very strong performance from some of the trade unionists, and so in the media, and so it may be that they prove to be popular in the long run and actually gain support for their position. But it remains to be seen, and polling is only ever a snapshot of public opinion at the moment. We will have to wait and see where the polls are in a week, 2 weeks, or a month's time.
Thanks, and thanks for explaining it. It all depends on the question you ask. And of course, that is absolutely the case. Thanks for joining us, Joe. So, Emma, I mean, the RMT strikes, they've happened now. We've had 2 days of, I was going to say misery.
Another one tomorrow.
And another one tomorrow.
Yeah.
How do you read the mood at the minute?
Look, it's a really difficult one, and as Joe says, people can support the strikes. They can support the principle of workers wanting to be able to keep up with the cost of living. We're all facing soaring food prices. The problem with strikes like this for essential services like transport, like the NHS, and like education, all of these are threatened strikes. Threatened union ballots happening over this summer of discontent. Problem is, it affects poorer people. It affects the more vulnerable. It affects the elderly. It's MPs that can jump in a cab. It's MPs that can sort out their arrangements. The fact that I was chatting to a lovely cleaning lady yesterday who said it had taken her 3 hours to get to some of her jobs. She's paid an hourly rate. She doesn't have a pension. She doesn't have any of those things. So while she supported the strikes, she's also a worker. So we all see what the workers are saying. So I feel really torn on this. It's a very, very difficult one.
And it appears that, the emphasis can change. So at the minute, people might be angry with the RMT for allowing these strikes to go ahead. But in some ways, it'll become then maybe towards the government if the government don't fix it and get it sorted out.
And I think the government haven't done themselves any favours this week. They've been making all sorts of announcements about, the reinstatement of the triple lock. Yeah. So that's great. So pensioners need help with the cost of living, which of course they do, although not all pensioners, and plenty of pensioners some pensioners are well off enough to not need the winter fuel allowance and not need the rise in the state pension. So I think that, these strange announcements about an uplift for some, and yet workers need to exercise pay restraints so as not to fuel the inflationary spiral. I think there are lots of mixed messages coming out of the Treasury and out of Number 10.
Yeah. Well, no doubt this is a story we'll be covering, unfortunately, for quite some time. But there we go. We're going to move on now to talk about an exclusive story for GB News. The policing minister has told GB News he's very confident that the government will meet its target of 20,000 new police officers across England and Wales by next March. Kit Malthouse was speaking on a visit to Suffolk Constabulary, which has recruited more than 100 new officers in recent months. Despite some high-profile policing scandals recently, the minister told our Home and Security editor, Mark White, that the vast majority of the public still trust the police and many would be happy to have a career in the service. Mark White tells us more.
BMW X3, showing insurance not held. Insurance not held.
On patrol with a team from Suffolk Constabulary's Sentinel unit in Ipswich Town Centre. They're tasked with combating drug crime. As they patrol, they're pulled over by a member of the public.
I just saw two lads in there exchanging something.
As they turn the vehicle, one of the two young men runs off. Another is grabbed on his bike.
I didn't see anything, man.
Yeah, okay, no, all right, okay.
With both eventually detained, officers find a bag of cannabis and arrest one of the men for dealing.
That is 120 quid's worth of cannabis right there.
These units are being assisted by the recruitment of dozens of new officers across the force. On foot patrol in Ipswich, two of Suffolk's recent recruits.
Hiya, you all right?
Hannah Barrell and Megan Groom joined the force just over a year ago, part of the uplift of thousands of new officers across England and Wales. Hannah told us it's certainly a challenging job, but says it's absolutely the right move for her.
You're the one running to the danger, not away from it. So you do have to have a bit of a backbone in that sense. But you know you want to better your community and you want to help those vulnerable people that you might be going to.
Megan joined the force after studying criminology.
It's a tough job, physically and emotionally. Sometimes you do see some hard things that you sort of have to try and detach yourselves from. But I say to people, you don't, like myself, you don't know until you try.
So much going on!
Can you just try and take a deep breath?
At police headquarters, the latest recruits are being put through challenging scenarios, watched over by the policing minister.
Wait, yeah, listen up, listen up. That car is sound out. Oh, sorry, you're under arrest.
For what? Although the police service has been hit by several recent scandals, Kit Malthouse believes the vast majority of the public still have confidence in the police, and many would be happy to make it their career.
We cannot take that trust for granted, and police leadership from top to bottom realise that you have to constantly reinforce those bonds of trust. So these extra 20,000 police officers that we're recruiting, making sure that a good proportion of them are out on the streets in uniform, building that bond every day. That's all part of the mix as well, and we cannot take that trust for granted. I know every police officer understands that.
These training scenarios are vital in preparing new recruits for what they might face out on the streets. Policing leaders say that those who opt for a career on the front line protecting the public, well, for them, this is a job like no other. The government has now added 13,500 new officers to police ranks across England and Wales. With a new recruitment drive launched this week, the policing minister says he's very confident they'll meet their overall target of 20,000 new officers by next March. Mark White, GB News, Ipswich.
I'm delighted to say that Mark is now with me in the studio. Mark, this was a pledge, wasn't it, of 20,000 new officers by March of next year, and it looks as if they say they're going to do that.
Yes, I think the important thing, though, probably to point out here is that what this will achieve at the end of the day is returning police officer numbers to the position they were before the austerity cuts started to bite in 2010, when over the course of pretty much the next decade, the numbers fell and fell and fell to about 21,000. So we're being restored back to that level. But still, I think that's to be welcomed. In terms of giving police officers more manpower, their police forces more manpower to be able to mount more effective policing. But of course, you still then have an awful lot of new recruits who are very inexperienced coming into the overall pool.
That reminds me of the pattern reforms in Northern Ireland, when we lost a huge swathe of really mature police officers who had a lot of skills, and we lost them all and brought in some new officers, but we still had a huge gap then.
And this is actually a big problem for them as well, because in addition to the fact that 20,000 police officers have gone in recent years and they're trying to get police officers, new recruits, back in, they're also losing quite a lot of experienced hands as well. Not just the 20,000 that have gone, but others who have decided it's not for them anymore, pay conditions, lots of other issues around policing that they're not happy about anymore, that they want to leave the service, means that they are dealing with very many new recruits who, yes, they've been trained up an intensive 10-week training course, but they're out there, they're rookies, they're having to, if they can, be paired up with more experienced officers to help them through. But it'll be some time, often years, before they're very effective in terms of the policing solutions that they can offer.
Yeah, because you can't just give them experience in their training period, you know. I mean, if you're losing senior detectives, for example, how can you fill that gap? And often people are brought back as actually civilians to work in police service.
Well, it's funny, the Metropolitan Police is now involved in actually reaching out to police officers who took redundancy, who retired during the period of austerity when numbers were being cut, and trying to tempt them back in with bonuses and extra incentives to come and work for them again. Some are going back in, and that's to be welcomed because they will have that experience. And of course, some experience back in civilian life to bring with them back into the force. But they are, you know, at the end of the day, they are still struggling in terms of having the number of experienced officers to fill the ranks out that they once had. A lot of new recruits, but a lot of inexperienced new recruits. And there's a churn rate as well, which we should mention, the attrition rate. So although they will hire 20,000 overall officers, about a third of those they're recruiting are leaving. So they're having to hire even more than the 20,000 to meet that 20,000 figure. It's a bit complicated, but, you know.
I was just going to say, we'll probably have to have you back to talk about statistics in the near future, Mark, but for now, thank you.
Statistics.
For now, thanks for coming in. So, Emma, this pledge of 20,000 officers, what do you make of the Kit Malthouse interview today?
Well, as Mark points out, it will only take us back to 2010 levels, which is obviously a good thing. I would actually disagree with Kit Malthouse. I think that the public perception of the police in general has been quite badly damaged, actually, by the Met Police scandals and that murder of Sarah Everard and things like that. But of course, it's a good thing. We need to get levels back up and then further increase, but also to retain that experience, that, you know, those policemen that have served for many, many decades. That's what we need to retain in the service.
It is, absolutely. And I just want to very briefly, obviously, we need to mention Rwanda. I'd hoped that we were going to go live to Rwanda, but unfortunately we can't at this moment in time. Of course, there was that meeting between Prince Charles today and the Prime Minister.
A cup of tea.
Yes, indeed.
One would have loved to be a fly on the wall on that. Did they raise the appalling comments? Did they not raise the appalling comments? I mean, let's see. I don't know what they discussed. Obviously, that was a private meeting. Sure. But yeah, might have been slightly awkward, a little bit like that Tory dinner between the three recent leaders of the Tory party.
Well, the fact of the matter is, at least it took place. I mean, it would have been worse if there hadn't have been the meeting. I think that's important.
I think Clarence House have been pretty frustrated at the fact that, you know, the comments, the private comments, have been overshadowing the really important work that Prince Charles wants to raise about what he's doing at the Commonwealth Heads of Leaders meeting. And so hopefully, you know, we can talk about something other than internal politics and Boris Johnson.
And very briefly, of course, the Prime Minister's not coming home from Rwanda. He's going somewhere else after all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he's leaving the seat scarily open, 8 days of him not being around, and who knows what the MPs will cook up in his absence.
So he's off to Germany and off then to Madrid for the NATO summit. So G7 first in Germany and then the NATO summit in Madrid. So we'll cover all of that next week, I've no doubt about that. But you've been watching and listening to The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster. The show's back every Friday from 3 p.m. And up next, it's Dana Quia.
Afternoon, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fresher feel arriving for all of us this weekend, with western areas quite blustery with plenty of showers, but in the east, many places dry and bright with sunny spells. This cold front is swinging across the country tonight, introducing the cooler air, but the low is sticking around like an unwanted guest through the weekend. Tightly packed isobars suggesting some pretty gusty conditions in the west. But it's across the northeast into southeast Scotland where we've got the risk of some disruption this evening. Some thunderstorms that have been breaking out, bringing the potential for some very heavy downpours and hailstorms as well. But that cold front swings through and moves away those thundery showers and eventually introducing cooler air. It'll still be pretty warm and humid and difficult for sleeping this evening, but by dawn most of us will feel that fresher air and a cooler feel on Saturday. Still quite a bit of sunshine around, certainly for eastern parts of Scotland and eastern England. But further west, yes, there'll be some sunny spells, but also we are expecting showers over the Midlands, Wales, western parts of England and some across southwest Scotland. Could be quite wet in the west of Northern Ireland as well, but as I say, some sunny spells elsewhere. Still reasonably pleasant in the east, but it won't be as humid. Temperatures in the low 20s, whereas for many western areas we're only looking at temperatures in the mid to high teens. Feeling cooler with the winds as well. You can see that swirl there. That's that low pressure system. Gusty winds continuing in the west overnight and into Sunday. Could bring some disruption to the ferry services as that band of rain then moves its way a little bit further eastwards during Sunday. So more showers on Sunday for Wales, western parts of Scotland. A wetter day here. More heavy downpours across Northern Ireland. But again, notice in the east, certainly on Sunday, East Anglia and the southeast, not many showers at all. Many places will be dry. We could still squeak up to 20 Celsius here, but again, for many places, we're only in the high teens and feeling cooler with that gusty wind.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.